Hey, before we dive deep into this forbidden knowledge, I want to know, what time is it where you're watching this right now, and where in the world are you? Drop it in the comments because here's why I'm asking. The time you're watching this and where you are isn't random, it's part of your soul's perfect synchronization with this message. Your consciousness called you here at this exact moment to receive what you've been searching for, and I want to acknowledge that cosmic alignment, so let me know below. You've probably walked down a crowded street, sat in a cafe, or stood in line at a grocery store and found yourself staring at the back of someone's head. And then, without any logical reason, that person turns around and looks directly at you, right? You've experienced this hundreds of times in your life, and every single time, you probably thought it was just coincidence, just random chance, just one of those weird things that happens. But what if I told you that what you just experienced is one of the most suppressed pieces of evidence that consciousness exists beyond your physical body, that your awareness can literally touch another person's energy field from across a room, and that ancient mystery schools have known about this quantum phenomenon for thousands of years, but modern science has desperately tried to dismiss it because accepting this truth would completely shatter the materialist worldview that keeps humanity trapped in spiritual amnesia? Here's the secret that changes everything. When you stare at someone and they turn around, you're not just looking at them with your eyes, you're projecting a beam of consciousness, a focused stream of awareness that physically impacts their electromagnetic field, and their soul feels this intrusion before their conscious mind even registers it, which is why they turn around, and this simple everyday occurrence is absolute proof that you are not just a body with a brain generating consciousness, but rather you are consciousness itself temporarily inhabiting a physical form, and your awareness can extend far beyond the boundaries of your skull. The ancient Egyptians knew this truth intimately, which is why in the mystery schools of Kemet they taught initiates about the Eye of Horus, not as some symbolic metaphor but as a literal description of how consciousness projects outward through focused attention, creating what they called the Ka projection, your spiritual double that extends into the space around you. And when you focus that Ka energy toward another person through sustained attention, their Ka field immediately registers the contact, sending alarm signals through their nervous system that manifest as that sudden urge to turn around and identify the source of the attention. But here's where it gets even more profound. Modern quantum physics has accidentally stumbled upon the same truth through experiments that absolutely terrify mainstream scientists, because in study after study after study, researchers have discovered what they reluctantly call the psychic staring effect, where human subjects can detect, when they're being observed from behind at rates that are statistically impossible to explain through chance alone. We're talking about success rates of 60, 70, sometimes even 80% when random chance would only produce 50%, and these results have been replicated across hundreds of studies involving tens of thousands of participants. Yet you've probably never heard about this research because it threatens the fundamental assumption of materialism, that consciousness is just a byproduct of brain chemistry with no ability to affect anything outside the skull. The truth is, your consciousness operates through what quantum physicists are now calling non-local awareness, which is just their uncomfortable way of saying that your awareness exists in multiple places simultaneously and can interact with the quantum field that connects all living things. And when you focus your attention on another person, you're not just passively observing them, you're actively entangling your consciousness with theirs at the quantum level, creating what the ancient Vedic texts called Chit Shakti or mind force, a tangible energy that can be felt across space and time. Think about this for a moment, really let this sink in. Your eyes are not just cameras passively recording reality, they are projectors actively emitting consciousness into the world, which is why every ancient spiritual tradition from Tibetan Buddhism to Hermetic teachings to indigenous shamanic practices has emphasized the power of the gaze, the ability to bless or curse with a look, to heal or harm through focused attention, and why terms like evil eye, stink eye, or if looks could kill exist in virtually every culture on Earth. These aren't just metaphors or superstitions, they're ancestral knowledge encoded into language, preserved across generations by people who understood something profound about the nature of consciousness that modern civilization has desperately tried to forget. But here's what makes this even more incredible. The mechanism behind this phenomenon reveals something revolutionary about how reality actually works, because when you understand why someone can feel your stare, you unlock the secret to understanding telepathy, remote viewing, distant healing, and every other paranormal ability that you've been told is impossible. Let me break down exactly what's happening at the quantum level when you stare at someone and they feel it, because this is where ancient mysticism and cutting-edge physics merge into one undeniable truth. Everything in the universe, including your body and your consciousness, is made of vibrating energy patterns, right? This isn't New Age fluff, this is confirmed by quantum mechanics. Every atom in your body is 99.9999% empty space with tiny particles vibrating at specific frequencies, and these particles don't even exist as solid matter until they're observed, which means that consciousness itself is literally collapsing probability waves into physical reality through the act of observation. Now, your brain and nervous system generate a measurable electromagnetic field that extends several feet beyond your physical body. This has been documented with sensitive instruments and is completely accepted by science. But what science doesn't want to acknowledge is that this field is not just a passive byproduct of neural activity, it's actually a carrier wave for consciousness itself. A medium through which your awareness can extend and interact with other electromagnetic fields around you. When you focus your attention on another person, especially with emotional intensity or prolonged concentration, you are directing a coherent stream of this electromagnetic consciousness toward them. And because human beings have evolved for millions of years to detect potential threats and social attention for survival purposes, we have incredibly sensitive mechanisms in our nervous system specifically designed to pick up these subtle energetic intrusions. The back of your neck and your spine contain what neurologists call mechanoreceptors and proprioceptors. But what they don't tell you is that these sensors are also picking up quantum information from the morphic field around you, detecting disturbances in the local electromagnetic environment that signal when another consciousness is focusing on you. The Tibetan Buddhists have an entire practice built around this phenomenon called Tonglen meditation, where advanced practitioners learn to send and receive consciousness through focused attention, and in their monasteries high in the Himalayas, monks can demonstrate the ability to know when they're being observed even from hundreds of meters away, even through walls and obstacles, because they've trained their awareness to become so sensitive to these quantum fluctuations in the consciousness field that they can detect the slightest ripple of attention directed toward them. And before you dismiss this as impossible, remember that birds can navigate using Earth's magnetic field, sharks can sense electrical impulses from muscle contractions miles away, and even humans can feel when someone is standing behind them in a dark room. You've experienced this yourself. So why is it so hard to accept that your consciousness might have detection abilities that go beyond the 5 traditional senses? The answer is simple. Accepting this truth means accepting that you are not a powerless meat robot controlled by chemical reactions and genetic programming. It means accepting that you are a powerful spiritual being whose consciousness can literally affect reality through intention and attention, and that level of personal sovereignty is absolutely terrifying to systems of control that depend on keeping you small, distracted, and disconnected from your true nature. Here's where this gets even deeper, and this is knowledge that was hidden in the ancient Egyptian pyramid texts and the emerald tablet of Hermes Trismegistus. Consciousness doesn't just extend outward from your body, it exists in what mystics call the Akashic field, or what quantum physicists are starting to call the zero-point field, which is essentially a universal information matrix that connects every point in space and time simultaneously. When you focus your attention on someone, you're not sending energy across physical space like throwing a ball, you're accessing a genuine local connection that already exists between all consciousness in the unified field, and you're activating that connection through focused intention, which creates an instantaneous information transfer that bypasses the limitations of space and time altogether. This is why in advanced states of meditation or during spontaneous mystical experiences, people report being able to know what others are thinking, feeling, or experiencing even across vast distances, because they've temporarily accessed this unified field of consciousness where separation is the illusion and connection is the reality. The ancient Vedic rishis called this state Turiya, or the fourth state of consciousness beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, and they taught that in this state you realize that the boundary between your consciousness and their consciousness is completely artificial, that there is only one consciousness experiencing itself through billions of different perspectives, which means that when someone turns around because they felt your stare, what actually happened is that the one consciousness temporarily recognized itself looking at itself, creating a feedback loop of awareness that manifested as their physical response. Now let me tell you about the scientific studies that absolutely demolish the skeptical arguments against this phenomenon, because there have been researchers brave enough to risk their careers by investigating what mainstream science refuses to acknowledge. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, a Cambridge-trained biochemist, conducted extensive experiments on the sense of being stared at, using completely randomized, double-blind protocols where subjects sat with their backs to a window through which observers would either stare at them or look away during randomly assigned intervals, and the results were absolutely stunning. People could detect when they were being stared at with statistical significance that was millions to one against chance, and the effect was even stronger when the person staring had an emotional connection to the subject or when they focused with greater intensity. The skeptics tried to dismiss these findings by claiming it was all just experimenter bias or subtle sensory cues. But Sheldrake anticipated these objections and designed experiments where the subjects were in completely sealed rooms with CCTV cameras as the only connection, where the observer watched them on a screen from a different building, and still the subjects could detect when they were being observed at rates far exceeding chance. Even more incredibly, the phenomenon works through photographs and video recordings, where people report feeling uncomfortable or sensing something when someone is intensely staring at their image, which suggests that consciousness can connect through representational media because the photo or video serves as a symbolic anchor point in the unified field. But here's what the ancient mystery schools understood that modern science is only beginning to grasp. This ability to project and detect consciousness through attention is not some rare paranormal gift, it's your birthright as a conscious being. It's happening all the time whether you're aware of it or not, and you can actually develop and strengthen this ability through specific practices that have been preserved in esoteric traditions for millennia. The Hermetic order taught that attention is the fundamental creative force in the universe, that where you place your consciousness is where your energy flows, and wherever your energy flows, physical reality responds and reshapes itself accordingly, which is why they emphasized training the will to maintain unwavering focus as the foundation of all magical practice. The Hindu and Buddhist tantric traditions teach similar techniques through tritaka or steady gazing meditation, where you practice maintaining absolute focus on a single point like a candle flame for extended periods. And this training doesn't just improve concentration, it actually strengthens the coherence and projection power of your consciousness field, making your attention more palpable and detectable to others. And here's something fascinating that connects to your everyday experience. Have you ever been in a crowded room and suddenly known that someone across the room was looking at you, even though you had no visual confirmation? That's your consciousness detecting the focused attention directed at you through the quantum field. Or have you ever thought about someone intensely and then they called or texted you moments later? That's you projecting consciousness toward them through the non-local field, and their consciousness registering the contact and prompting them to reach out. These experiences are so common that everyone has had them multiple times, yet we've been conditioned to dismiss them as coincidence rather than recognizing them as evidence of our true nature as non-local consciousness. The implications of this truth are absolutely revolutionary when you really contemplate them, because if your consciousness can extend beyond your body and affect other people through focused attention, then what else can you affect? Can you influence events? Can you heal from a distance? Can you access information from other places and times? The answer that mystics and shamans have known for thousands of years is yes, absolutely yes, and the same mechanism that allows someone to feel your stare is the mechanism behind all psychic phenomena: remote viewing, telepathy, precognition, psychokinesis. It's all based on the fundamental truth that consciousness is not confined to your brain. It's a non-local field phenomenon that can interact with reality at any point through focused intention. The CIA's Project Stargate proved this conclusively through decades of classified research, where military remote viewers demonstrated the ability to accurately describe distant locations they had never seen, to predict future events with statistical significance, and to influence random number generators through mental intention alone. And even though the project was officially discontinued, the operational applications continue to this day because the results were too successful to ignore, too useful to abandon. But they don't want you to know this. They don't want you to realize that you have these innate abilities, because a population that understands its true power as conscious creators cannot be easily controlled, manipulated, or kept in fear. Let's go even deeper into the ancient wisdom traditions and see how they explained this phenomenon thousands of years before quantum physics existed, because what you're going to discover is that the mystics mapped consciousness with incredible precision using direct experiential knowledge rather than intellectual theorizing. In the yogic tradition of India, they teach about prana or life force energy that flows through subtle channels called nadis, and they explain that every human being has multiple energy bodies that extend beyond the physical form. The pranamaya kosha or energy body, the manomaya kosha or mental body, and the vijnanamaya kosha or wisdom body. And these subtle bodies interact with other people's energy fields constantly, which is why you can walk into a room and immediately feel the emotional atmosphere even before anyone speaks, or why you can sense someone's intentions toward you even when they're smiling and saying nice things. The ancient yogis taught that when you focus your attention on someone, you're extending your manomaya kosha toward them, creating a subtle energetic cord or connection, And if that connection is strong enough or maintained long enough, the other person's pranic field will register the intrusion and alert their conscious awareness, causing them to turn and look. The Tibetan Bon tradition has similar teachings about lung energy and the subtle winds that carry consciousness, and they developed incredibly sophisticated practices for perceiving and manipulating these energy currents, including techniques for deliberately projecting your consciousness to distant locations while your body remains in meditation, what we now call astral projection or remote viewing, but what they simply called training in the nature of mind. The Egyptian mystery schools at Heliopolis taught their initiates about the Sikkim or power body, explaining that human consciousness operates simultaneously on multiple planes of existence. The physical plane where your body resides, the astral plane where your emotions and desires exist, the mental plane where your thoughts and beliefs operate, and the causal plane where your eternal soul essence dwells. And they taught that attention is the bridge between these planes, the mechanism through which consciousness can affect matter, which is why their magical practices always emphasized focused visualization and concentrated willpower as the tools for manifesting changes in physical reality. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as within, so without, is describing this exact principle, that consciousness and matter are not separate substances but different vibrational frequencies of the same underlying reality, and by manipulating consciousness through attention and intention, you simultaneously affect the material world because there is no separation between mind and matter at the quantum level. When someone feels your stare and turns around, they're experiencing a direct demonstration of this principle in action. Their consciousness is detecting the focused attention you're projecting, and their physical body is responding to this non-physical stimulus, proving that the mind-matter barrier is completely permeable and that consciousness has priority over materiality in the fundamental structure of reality. Now here's where this knowledge becomes practical and empowering for your daily life. Because once you understand that your attention literally shapes reality and affects other people's consciousness, you can start using this power intentionally rather than unconsciously. Every spiritual tradition emphasizes the cultivation of mindfulness and present moment awareness, but they rarely tell you why this is so important. It's because your attention is constantly creating your reality, and when your attention is scattered, reactive, and unconscious, you're essentially broadcasting random chaotic energy into the quantum field, which manifests as a random chaotic life experience. But when you train your attention to become focused, coherent, and intentional, you become a powerful creator of your reality. And this starts with something as simple as becoming aware of where you're placing your attention throughout the day. Notice how often you're genuinely present with the people you're interacting with versus how often you're physically there but mentally elsewhere. Notice how your attention gets captured and hijacked by screens, notifications, and external stimuli designed to fragment your consciousness. Notice how you unconsciously stare at strangers with judgment, desire, or fear, and realize that every moment of attention you give to something is an act of creation. You're literally feeding that thing with your consciousness and making it stronger in your reality. The ancient practice of metta or loving-kindness meditation teaches you to intentionally direct benevolent attention toward all beings, and what you're actually doing is learning to project coherent, healing consciousness through the quantum field. And people who practice this consistently report that strangers become friendlier, conflicts resolve more easily, and synchronicities multiply because they've trained their consciousness to broadcast a frequency of connection rather than separation. Similarly, the practice of evil eye protection in various cultures isn't superstition. It's recognition that malevolent or envious attention can genuinely affect your energy field, and the remedies they developed, whether it's wearing protective amulets, visualizing shields of light, or reciting mantras, are all techniques for strengthening the coherence of your own consciousness field so that negative attention simply bounces off rather than penetrating and affecting you. You can test this yourself right now in your daily life. The next time you're in a public place, choose someone who's facing away from you and focus your attention on the back of their head with gentle intensity. Don't stare aggressively or with negative emotion. Just maintain a steady, curious focus and watch how long it takes for them to turn around or shift their position. You'll be amazed at how often this works, and each time it does, you're confirming for yourself that consciousness extends beyond the brain, that you are not limited to your physical senses, that there is something more to your nature than what materialist science has told you. But let's go even deeper into the quantum mechanics of this phenomenon, because understanding the how will liberate you from any remaining doubt about the what. At the subatomic level, particles exist in what physicists call a superposition of all possible states until they are observed, at which point the wave function collapses, and the particle assumes a definite position, momentum, and state. This is the famous observer effect that has been demonstrated in countless experiments like the double-slit experiment where photons behave as waves when unobserved but as particles when measured. Now, mainstream physics tries to claim that observation just means measurement with instruments, that consciousness has nothing to do with it, but here's what they can't explain. When you set up experiments where the measurement happens but no conscious observer looks at the results until later, the particles still behave as if they knew whether they would eventually be observed, even retroactively affecting their past behavior based on future observation. This phenomenon, called delayed choice quantum erasure experiments, absolutely proves that consciousness itself is the factor that collapses wave functions, not mechanical measurement, because the physical measurement happens either way, but the outcome depends on whether consciousness engages with the information. This means that at the most fundamental level of reality, consciousness is not an emergent property of matter. Consciousness is primary and matter emerges from it, which is exactly what every mystical tradition has been teaching for thousands of years. That consciousness is the ground of being, the fundamental substance of reality, and physical matter is the temporary crystallization of consciousness into form. When you stare at someone and they feel it, what's happening is that your focused consciousness is creating a pattern of coherence in the quantum field surrounding that person. You're essentially observing their energy field with sustained attention, which affects the probability waves of the subatomic particles that make up their electromagnetic field, and this perturbation of their field is detected by their nervous system as a signal that alerts them to turn around. It's the same mechanism by which consciousness collapses wave functions in physics experiments, just applied to the biological electromagnetic field generated by a human nervous system. The reason modern science is so resistant to this explanation is because accepting it means accepting that consciousness is fundamental rather than derivative, which completely inverts the materialist worldview and opens the door to acknowledging the validity of every spiritual tradition that has ever existed. If consciousness can affect quantum particles through observation in a laboratory, then of course consciousness can affect other biological systems through focused attention. Of course prayer can influence healing. Of course intention can affect random events. Of course your thoughts contribute to creating your reality. These are not supernatural miracles. They are the natural consequences of consciousness being primary in a quantum universe. The Hermetic tradition preserved this knowledge in coded form in texts like the Kybalion, which teaches the principle of mentalism. The all is mind. The universe is mental, meaning that the fundamental substance of reality is consciousness itself, and all of physical manifestation is consciousness in temporary form. They taught 7 Hermetic principles that describe how consciousness creates and shapes reality, and every single one of these principles is now being confirmed by quantum physics. But the ancient Hermeticists understood these truths through direct mystical experience and inner experimentation rather than external measurement. The principle of vibration teaches that everything is in constant motion at different frequencies, which is identical to quantum field theory, where all matter is vibrating energy. The principle of correspondence teaches, as above, so below, meaning that the same patterns repeat at every scale from the cosmic to the quantum, which is exactly what fractal mathematics and holographic universe theories describe. The principle of cause and effect teaches that nothing happens by chance, that every effect has a cause in consciousness, which aligns perfectly with the observer effect in quantum mechanics, where consciousness causes wave function collapse. These weren't metaphysical speculations, these were precise descriptions of how reality operates, preserved in initiatory traditions and passed down through generations of mystics who had directly experienced the quantum nature of consciousness through practices like meditation, breath work, sensory deprivation, and entheogenic sacraments that allow consciousness to perceive itself more clearly. Now let me tell you about the most profound implication of understanding that someone can feel your stare. It means that privacy is ultimately an illusion at the level of consciousness, that you cannot hide your true intentions, emotions, and thoughts from other conscious beings because these emanate from you as electromagnetic and quantum field patterns that sensitive people can pick up. This is why genuine spiritual teachers can often see right through your ego masks and defenses, why authentic shamans can diagnose your psychological and spiritual issues just by being in your presence, why some people give you an immediate feeling of trustworthiness while others trigger alarm bells even when they're saying all the right things. You're picking up the actual consciousness signals they're broadcasting, not just the carefully curated persona they're presenting. Children and animals are especially sensitive to these signals because they haven't yet learned to override their intuitive perception with mental analysis and social conditioning, which is why a child will sometimes refuse to go near a person who seems perfectly nice to adults, or why a dog will bark at someone who triggers their instinctual threat detection even though the person appears friendly. They're responding to the consciousness field, the energetic signature, the quantum information, that reveals true intentions beneath surface appearances. This is also why you can sometimes feel when someone is lying to you even though their words are perfectly convincing, why you might feel drained after spending time with certain people even though nothing obviously negative happened, why you feel energized and uplifted around others even in silence. You're in constant telepathic communion with everyone around you through the quantum field, receiving and transmitting consciousness information continuously, and the only reason you don't experience this consciously most of the time is because your rational mind filters out this noise to focus on socially agreed upon reality. But mystics and shamans throughout history have developed techniques to amplify this natural sensitivity, to consciously perceive the thoughts and feelings of others, to deliberately influence consciousness at a distance, and to protect their own consciousness field from unwanted intrusion. The practice of psychic shielding, found in Western ceremonial magic, the Vajra tent protection visualization in Tibetan Buddhism, the aura cleansing techniques in various New Age practices. These are all methods for strengthening the coherence and boundaries of your personal consciousness field so that you're not constantly affected by every stray thought and emotion in your environment. Here's a practice you can start today to develop your own ability to consciously project and detect attention. It's called kasina practice in the Buddhist tradition and scrying or gazing in the Western magical traditions, and it's incredibly simple but profoundly effective. Find a quiet place where you won't be disturbed, and place a small object in front of you at eye level. It could be a candle flame, a crystal, a dot on the wall, anything that provides a single focal point. Then practice maintaining steady, unwavering attention on that object for increasing periods of time, starting with just 1 minute and gradually building up to 20 or 30 minutes. The key is to keep your eyes open and soft-focused, not straining or staring hard, but maintaining a gentle, continuous awareness of the object without letting your mind wander to thoughts, without blinking excessively, without looking away. Every time your attention drifts, gently bring it back to the object, and over time you'll notice that your ability to maintain focus increases dramatically, that your consciousness becomes more concentrated and powerful, that the field of awareness around you becomes more palpable and extended. After several weeks of consistent practice, you'll start to notice that people respond to your attention more readily, that they turn around when you look at them more consistently, that you can feel the attention of others directed at you with greater sensitivity, and most importantly, that your general ability to focus consciousness and manifest intentions in your life becomes significantly stronger because you've trained the fundamental tool of creation, attention itself. The Sufi mystics have a saying, "Wherever you direct your attention, there you are," and this is describing the non-local nature of consciousness, that your awareness is not trapped inside your skull but can be present anywhere you focus it, which is how remote viewing works, how telepathy operates, how distant healing is possible. When you focus on someone across the room and they feel it, you haven't sent something from your location to their location across physical space. You've shifted your awareness to become present at their location. Your consciousness has temporarily localized itself in their vicinity, and they're feeling the presence of your awareness in their field. This is why the practice of sending love or sending healing energy to someone at a distance is not just a nice metaphorical gesture. It's an actual energetic transmission where you place your consciousness in connection with theirs through the non-local field and allow healing frequencies to flow through that connection. Distance is irrelevant at the level of consciousness because consciousness doesn't travel through space. It's already everywhere simultaneously, and focused attention is just how you consciously direct and localize the universal consciousness that you are into specific points of interaction. Now let's talk about the shadow side of this knowledge, because with great power comes great responsibility, and understanding that your attention affects others means you have an ethical obligation to be mindful of how you're using this power. In many traditional cultures, there are strong taboos against staring at people, especially strangers, and these aren't just arbitrary social conventions, they're recognition that sustained attention can be invasive and violating, that your consciousness entering someone else's field without permission is a form of energetic intrusion. The concept of evil eye found in Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, and Latin American cultures recognizes that envious, lustful, or malevolent attention can genuinely harm the recipient, causing illness, bad luck, or misfortune, and while skeptics dismiss this as superstition, it's actually acknowledging the very real phenomenon we've been discussing. That consciousness projected with negative emotion carries that negative frequency and can disrupt the recipient's energetic field. This is why many spiritual traditions teach practices of blessing rather than cursing, of sending benevolent attention rather than jealous or angry focus, because your attention is always affecting others whether you intend it or not, and you're creating karma, cause and effect patterns, with every moment of consciousness you project into the world. The most empowering aspect of this knowledge is that it proves you are not a victim of circumstances. You are not just a biological robot responding mechanically to external stimuli. You are a powerful creative consciousness whose attention shapes reality continuously. When you truly internalize this truth, your entire relationship to life transforms. You stop giving your attention away unconsciously to whatever grabs it. You start consciously choosing where to focus your awareness. You recognize that every act of attention is an act of creation and manifestation. This is the secret that ancient mystics guarded carefully, teaching it only to initiates who had proven their ethical integrity and spiritual maturity, because this knowledge can be misused by those who lack compassion and wisdom. But in this current era of mass awakening, this knowledge is being released to humanity collectively because we've reached a tipping point where enough people are ready to reclaim their sovereignty as conscious creators, and the old systems of control that depended on keeping people ignorant of their true nature are finally collapsing under the weight of their own corruption. Every time someone turns around because they felt your stare, you're witnessing a miracle, not a supernatural event defying natural law, but a natural expression of consciousness demonstrating its true nature as the primary creative force in reality. You're seeing evidence that the materialist paradigm is incomplete, that consciousness cannot be reduced to brain chemistry, that you are so much more than you've been taught to believe. And here's the truly liberating part. If consciousness can extend beyond your body to touch someone else's awareness across a room, then consciousness must be eternal and indestructible because it exists beyond the physical constraints that define matter. Your body will eventually die and decompose, but the consciousness that you are, the awareness that is reading these words right now, that consciousness is non-local and eternal, it exists beyond space and time, and physical death is simply the release of consciousness from one temporary form back into the infinite field from which all forms arise. This is why every mystical tradition teaches that you are not your body, you are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions. You are the awareness in which all of these phenomena appear, and that awareness was never born and can never die because it's the eternal ground of being itself. So the next time you're in a public place and you stare at someone and they turn around, don't dismiss it as coincidence. Recognize it as a direct personal demonstration of your true nature as non-local consciousness, as confirmation that reality is far more mysterious and magical than you've been taught, as invitation to explore the depths of your own awareness and discover the incredible powers that lie dormant within you waiting to be awakened. Start paying attention to these moments, start experimenting with consciously projecting your awareness, start noticing when others' attention is directed at you, and gradually you'll develop a whole new level of conscious perception that transforms how you navigate through life. You'll start picking up on the subtle telepathic communication that happens constantly beneath verbal conversation. You'll sense people's true intentions beneath their words. You'll feel the emotional atmospheres of environments before entering them. You'll develop genuine intuition that guides you away from danger and toward opportunity, and most importantly, you'll know with absolute certainty that you are not a powerless speck of consciousness accidentally produced by matter, but rather you are eternal awareness temporarily focused into a human form for the purpose of experiencing, creating, and evolving. The ancient Vedic seers declared Tat Tvam Asi. Thou art that, meaning that the consciousness you experience as you is identical to the universal consciousness that creates and sustains all of reality. There is no separation between your awareness and the cosmic awareness. You are the universe experiencing itself through this particular perspective, and when someone turns around because they felt your stare, That's the one universal consciousness recognizing itself, like the left hand, suddenly noticing the right hand across the room. This is the ultimate truth that all spiritual seeking points toward, that separation is the illusion, that individuality is a temporary game consciousness plays with itself, that everything and everyone is one consciousness wearing different masks and playing different roles in the grand cosmic drama. And quantum physics is now confirming this ancient mystical insight through experiments showing quantum entanglement where particles separated by vast distances instantly affect each other, through studies showing that observation affects reality at the fundamental level, through theories proposing that consciousness is the ground state from which material reality emerges. You are living in the most exciting time in human history, where ancient wisdom and modern science are finally converging, where the veil between worlds is growing thinner, where mass spiritual awakening is accelerating exponentially. More and more people are experiencing spontaneous psychic phenomena, mystical states, Kundalini awakenings, past life memories, out-of-body experiences, contact with non-physical beings and dimensions. These aren't signs of mental illness or imagination. These are symptoms of consciousness remembering its true nature and expanding beyond the narrow bandwidth of consensus reality. And something as simple as noticing that people turn around when you stare at them is your personal gateway into this larger awakening, your invitation to question everything you've been taught about the nature of consciousness, reality, and your own potential. Don't let the materialist skeptics steal your direct experience with their dismissive explanations and limiting beliefs. Trust what you know from your own lived experience. Trust the mystical knowledge encoded in your DNA from thousands of generations of ancestors who lived in conscious connection with these deeper dimensions of reality. The quantum secret hidden in plain sight is this: consciousness is all there is. The entire universe is consciousness experiencing itself through infinite forms and perspectives, and you have the power to consciously direct and focus this creative force through attention and intention. When you stare at someone and they turn around, you're not doing something to them. You're activating a connection that already exists, because at the deepest level there is no you and them. There is only one awareness playing all the roles, and in that moment of connection, the illusion of separation briefly dissolves and unity consciousness flashes into recognition. This is why spiritual enlightenment is often described as waking up from the dream, because separation is the dream, multiplicity is the illusion, and the truth that liberates you from all. So the next time you feel someone's gaze on you or someone turns around when you're staring at them, remember, you just witnessed proof that you are so much more than this physical body, that your consciousness is unlimited, eternal, and connected to everything and everyone in this quantum universe. You are a powerful creator, and your attention is the brush with which you paint your reality. If this video opened your eyes to the truth of who you really are, hit that like button, subscribe for more forbidden knowledge, and drop a comment below telling me about your experiences with this phenomenon. I read every single one. And remember, you didn't find this video by accident. Your soul led you here because you're ready to wake up. Until next time, stay conscious, stay curious, and never stop questioning the reality they want you to accept. Peace.